Since the dawn of time, man has been curious. And for almost as long, the Vibes Broadcast Network has sought the truth. Investigate, discuss, explore. Okay, maybe in other episodes, but this one is just listen to the vibes.
The views and opinions of our guests may not necessarily reflect those of the host or the Vibes Broadcast Network. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. And I have here Mr. Mark Bradford. He's a writer, a speaker. He was a single dad like me, raising a couple of kids, and created a writing site and a dating site.
Yes,
Wow.
sir.
So tell us just a little bit about you, and we'll get a good conversation going.
Sure. Let me try to wrangle this properly because I'm all over the map. So I've run a technology firm for almost 20 years, which I can't believe. So consulting, that sort of thing. I am a full stack web developer, whatever that means. Hold on 1 second here. And then So I have quite the logical part of my brain, but then I also have creative endeavors where I got into writing. I wrote 4 nonfiction books, and then I had a very unusual thing happen that started me on the path of writing fiction. I also, when I first got into writing, unlike a normal person who would just fire up Word and just write something, I had to build a writing site, and I had like 500 members and people writing and sharing stories, and that was really cool. And I did it for free. You know, I always try to be very altruistic about these things, which is why I could have a much larger house, but I don't. And so because of that, so I did that, and then I also, when I found myself, like you said, a single dad, I created a dating site after doing a lot of research and found that all the dating sites were essentially the same and they were all backwards, and they were all created to keep you confused and keep you engaged, which means they don't want you to meet someone because it's one of the only products that if the product is successful, you stop using it. So they don't want that. And then I found out that like 80 of the dating sites, you know, the top 7 are all owned by the same company.
Oh,
And
wow.
again, yeah, and again, this is if you think about it, if a major office supply business buys another major office supply business, what happens? One of them goes away. They relabel it because they just envelop it. Not true for the dating sites, and there's only one reason for that, is so that you keep going to the different dating sites and going, well, this, you know, Tinder didn't work for me. Tinder sucks. I'll try Match. Match doesn't work. I'll try Chemistry. They're all owned by the same company, and they do that because so that way you can keep spending money in different directions for the same thing, the same policies and all that stuff. So anyway, I built my own dating site. It's actually still up, but it's kind of an interesting study in humanity, I guess is what it is. So, but it was a labor of love as usual. And then, and then I got into writing, and then I also decided for once to sort of treat myself, and I bought myself a drone because they came down, a photography drone. I started playing around with it, and I was terrified by the rules, the federal rules, and the fact that it's treated as an airplane. So if you shoot one down, you shot an airplane down. So it's pretty scary stuff. So then I went and got my pilot's license. So then I did some aerial photography stuff, and it's the result is beautiful and relaxing, but it's so tense flying the thing because you're sending this thing up hundreds of feet in the air, 1,000 feet away, and at any moment it could just drop, or birds won't like it and they'll just start attacking it and things like that. So it's pretty crazy stuff. But I'd say right now I'm in the mode where I'm doing I also have a podcast I do once a week about time, energy, and resources. So I love talking to people like you clearly do about, you know, just their life and what they do and stuff like that. So that's been an interesting thing that I do. And I seem to always connect with people who are dual brained. And once again, you're an example of that. Somebody who's really good at logical stuff because you have to be, or you wouldn't be running this successfully. And then you also have to be creative because you have to have that creative eye and the enjoyment of creative endeavors. And I just love that sort of thing. And that's what I'm blessed and cursed with as well. So that's me. You know, if that's a nutshell, it's the size of a house. So I apologize, but that's
No. Yeah, you know, when it comes to podcasting, it's something that you really have to love to do. or you'd give up on it quick, because it can
Yeah.
be time consuming, and especially if you're doing everything yourself, man, it could be a pain trying to get
Hmm.
people on the show, or finding topics to talk about, and doing the editing and everything else,
Exactly.
promoting it. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
So if you don't mind me asking, how did you become a single dad?
Oof. So things started changing around the household. Um, I guess the way my wife was interacting with my kids was a bit odd. Her behavior started to become a bit odd too. The kids started complaining about things, and when you sign up for things, you sign up for forever. Forever is not 14 years. So if you're committed, you say, well, I'm going to work through this. We're going to work through this. But like when I guess in a nutshell, things were happening that I couldn't really permit anymore. And it's so weird that you have this super strong desire to have this lifelong relationship, and you think there's nothing more powerful than that, and then you realize, yeah, there is. It's your kids. And that was what gave me the strength to actually file for divorce after this stuff was happening. I mean, it, it- I don't know, since I'm speaking to you about this, but the belief is that there might have been some mental illness or something like that. I don't know. I don't know. But basically, that it was a very, very difficult time. When you think about the best for your kids, you kind of stand in front of the dartboard and let the darts just hit you, which is what I had to do for a couple of years to get through that sort of thing, because ultimately I just wanted what was best for them.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think I stayed surprisingly objective. In fact, looking back now, I don't know if I could ever. How was I so objective? Because I just really was. I wanted to listen to them and what they had to say and things, but I was never one to sort of pile it on and say anything negative. Which there was a lot of negative stuff going on, but you know, it's weird. There, you're in a bubble when you're in a marriage, regardless of whether it's positive or negative,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody gets together and says, "Hey, Steve, does your wife do the following things? Is this normal?" I mean, women are better at that than men because they have been seasoned from being little girls to understanding relationships. Like, it's okay for them to talk about relationships and things. Men typically deal with spatial relationships. That's why they're really good at arranging stuff, and they're much more involved in tech and things like that. It's just the way that we're typically raised and typically we're wired. So women will get together in their groups and talk more about relationships to a point, but we all
Mm-hmm.
have that um, personal limit, because you're not going to throw your whole life and the intimacy of your marriage in front of people, whether they're good friends or not, because you should get some of that. You should be able to go, well, I know it's normal and this and this and this, but it's really hard when things do go awry. I mean, that's what happened, like when there's infidelity and things like that. um, you blame yourself. And I think males specifically, it's not hyperbole to say, if you're hypothetically, if someone's wife is unsatisfied, or they want to look elsewhere, it's the male's fault because he's not doing enough. If the male is unsatisfied and wants to look elsewhere, then, well, he's doing something wrong. So it all falls on his shoulders. It seems to, societally,
Yeah.
we seem to see that. That's all I'm saying. But sorry for this long, convoluted answer,
Oh,
but
no, no,
it's
no.
very
Take your
it's
time.
a, yeah, it's a kind of delicate thing. And as it worked out, it worked out, and I just became a single dad, and that was it. And I just had to make that work. Um, and it wasn't easy because I'm self-employed, so I was focusing on all the tech stuff, and all the wonderful, fun, creative stuff. I had to put a hold on that because I needed to do things that were serious. I needed to make sure that I was earning money, and there was no financial support from the other side. It was just, I was there 100%. It was just me. So
Yeah.
um, that's the way that sort of happened. And it's interesting because that same year, my ceiling collapsed and my dog died,
Oh no.
and I had a neck surgery at this neck fusion surgery. So it was all the same year. So that was a great year.
Myself. I know how that went.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, for me, I had a drug and alcohol problem for several years, and I ended up having a heart attack,
Oh my God.
and I was only 36. Well, it prompted me to change and get sober and all that, take better care of myself. And my wife was secretly seeing somebody else behind my back during this whole process. And then she ended up leaving me for this guy who was barely older than my daughter. And then uh, when we finally split, she had the kids, but she was mentally unstable too, bipolar. She was a pathological liar. I mean, the whole 9 yards. And I'm not going to go into details of what happened, but she said something she shouldn't have in front of the judge, and I ended up getting custody. But during this whole time, I'm giving her money, and so she could take care of the kids and whatnot. But whenever I got custody of the kids, I got no support from her whatsoever, which is fine. I can say I did it. It's not easy being a single dad and then wanting to date again. Especially, I got married at 19, 17 years of marriage. I don't remember how to date anymore. And I relied on some of those dating sites, and it was just one failure after another. So what sets yours apart from those? Because most of them were just women who were looking for money and sugar daddy, that kind of thing.
So when you say what sets mine apart, you mean the dating site I created?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So actually, after reviewing the 5 top dating sites, I realized that the only thing I could compare it to was real life. Real life won. Real life wins over dating sites on every category except for one, and it's efficiency. Because you could walk into a Starbucks and maybe you're lucky enough that there's a woman in there that you're attracted to that's age appropriate, that's a decent person, that's single and is interested in you, right? But a dating site hypothetically fills the Starbucks with 40 women that all fit all that, right? I mean, hypothetically, it's a database, so it should be able to do that. So I thought, well, how can I make my dating site be more like real life? And I thought, I'm going to go through the steps. So the way mine worked was that you, again, just like it's pictures, because everything's based on visual, and we decide whether we like someone in 7 seconds. I mean, we have nurture, nature, programming, and evolution, and beliefs and everything else. It's this massive amount of processing that's going on in our brain, and we don't think so. We just go, oh, I'm just going to look for my type. No, there's a lot that's going on. How the distance of someone's eyes, if they're big or small, their height, their way they carry themselves, how they dress, how they smell, all that stuff affects us. And we go, hello, what's all this then? And we find that person, we can sweep a room of faces, and she will stand out, just like hopefully you stand out, and that's the way it works. And so I thought, okay, well, that's kind of the swiping of the picture. So I started with a picture, but no name and no username, because nobody's walking around with Surfing Guy 207 on their chest, right?
Right.
It's kind of like, what's the point of that? So there's one picture, and once you swipe, or once you connect, if she connects with you, then you get to see 5 stats about her. That's all. So it's like you connected to her in a Starbucks line again, not to pick on Starbucks. So you get to see her height, because you would see how tall people are, and women height is number 1 with women. And then you get to see if she has kids or not. Like basically the things that you would pick up in small talk in line. You don't get to see what her religion is, because no one's going to blurt that out in line. No one's going to tell you what their income is. They probably won't even tell you what they do for a living. We just want to know basic things. No one's going to say, oh, you're really attractive, but I don't like your job. Or I'm completely unattracted to you, but boy, I really like that you're in dentistry. Like that's not important, right?
Right.
So then if both people look each other over and they go, oh, okay, I want to chat further, they both have to say, I want to talk. And then the chat thing comes up, and then they get to chat. And then that's it. Oh, sorry, I'm a little verklempt.
Oh no, I got my drink on hand too.
Yeah. So that's the way it worked. It worked in these stages. The problem with, and one of the other things I built into the site was, you can only have 3 outgoing connections at once.
Mm-hmm.
Because based on your experience too, I'm sure if you have 3 women that are very viable that you're interested in at the same time, that's a really good day, right? I mean, like you wade through hundreds of people in real life in a dating sites until you find 1 or 2. So I thought, to keep people's integrity, I would make it so that you could only have 3 outgoing connections to people. I'm interested in you, I'm interested in you, I'm interested in you. If there's a fourth person, you're going to have to drop one of those, because I had just assumed everyone was on the dating site for the same reason, which is long-term relationship. Now, of course, I know that's not true. I know lots of people want the wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and that's really all they're interested in, so forth.
Yeah.
But that wasn't me. So I naively built the site for people who were as naive as me and just wanted a real relationship. And so you can have as many incoming, but only 3 outgoing. And the outgoing connections even have a little timer on them where they tell you, hey, it's been like 3 days since you talked. Is this even, are you guys connected or not? So the problem with the site is that 2 things. It works too well. It works too well because it's like a utility. You would log onto the site, you'd look around, do your stuff, and you're done. Boom, 10 minutes, you're done. The other thing is I can't reach critical mass. Critical mass meaning enough people are on it, so enough people are on it. So if you get on it and you're looking for someone and you find this wonderful person in Vermont, it's not going to happen, right? So you need to get thousands of people in the same zip code and then explode from there. So it's a distance thing. So with the monopoly that other dating sites have, it probably is not going to be anything other than a very good experiment in me wasting a tremendous amount of time and learning a lot about relationships. So that's it in a nutshell. Once again, another giant house-shaped nutshell for you.
I really feel for the people that are dating now, because you just never know. People are either like far out there in the universe or they're grounded, and you never know. For guys, you get me too'd and all that stuff when you go out and you try to talk to women. And I know not all women are like that, don't get me wrong, but
No,
it
I'm just
seems to be
amazed
a
that you use
problem.
that, because I've said the same thing. And not to interrupt you, but it's a very delicate subject, because what it's really based on, but it was kind of hijacked. And exactly, the culture has changed. Like literally in the last 10 years, it's gotten intensely difficult to date because of that. Because, hi, how are you today, stranger? That's what's going to happen. And it's just amazing, because I have a number of married friends that are younger, and they're shocked when I tell them these stories. And I tell them, yeah, this is what would happen. This is what would happen. If you were single and you're a woman, you're going to be bombarded with men, because men are hunter-gatherers.
Yep.
And as a woman, as a man, you're going to be looked upon that you're a used car salesman, like that you're, no offense to used car salesman, but that you have no integrity, and that you're all salesy and this and this and this. You will not be given the benefit of the doubt. You will start at 0 and you'll have to build that up, while women start at 7 or 8 and are given the benefit, because we just do that. We just give them the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, yeah, you seem like a good person, while you're looked at as, somebody who wants to collect people in a van and drive them down by the river or something, So, right.
Exactly. Whenever we were younger, you had to go up and talk to somebody and find out if they were single and if they'd be interested, and you took that chance of being rejected. And nowadays, watching TikTok videos and other social media, you'll see these women who get offended because a man's attracted to them, and just because they don't feel the same way, it's like they're a creep. But if they feel attracted to whoever comes up to them, it's okay. But and then you don't know if they're attracted to the same sex or not. So
Right.
it's a
Right.
different world we're living in, for sure.
Well, and what you touched on was basically what my second book was about, is status. I mean, that's all relationships are based on status. And um, and I give an example of somebody, like somebody who looks like Brad Pitt and grabs a bunch of flowers in a grocery store and walks up to a woman and says, when I see these, I think of you. You're so pretty. And she wouldn't stop talking about that, right? But if a guy who had, was kind of overweight and had like a Dungeons and Dragons t-shirt on or something like that, or whatever, not to stereotype the nerdy kind, because I'm that, and walked up to her and did the same thing, she'd say, oh my God, this creepy guy followed me around the grocery store. He grabbed these flowers. He didn't even pay for them. Like, why would he do that? Like, the concept is entirely different. We're all looking for someone who has a higher status than us. And the magic interdimensional math of love is that you think she's higher and she thinks you're higher. And when that happens, you're in love. That's the way that works. It's a simple, weird kind of math, but it's true.
Um,
And the other example I use too is like the little girl in kindergarten, Valentine's Day. Remember what everyone had to bring Valentines, so everyone goes home with 30 Valentines, whether they want to or not. Well, little Kimmy gets all these Valentines, but she gets one from Ralph, and she's madly in love with Ralph, and she gets it, and she thinks it's like the rings of Sauron because it's like so important to her, right? And it's a magic item now, right? And she's never going to. The rest of it is a bunch of red paper in the trash, but this one is on her shelf. And she gave it all that magic power because of what she thinks of him, not him. He didn't do anything; she did. And it's all in her mind, and it's annoying because that's how it works, and that's why people get um, taken advantage of online too, because they give people the benefit of the doubt. That's why people do things, and the whole term simp, when men simp for women because they have these high aspirations of them being together, but they realize they're just a TikTok person and they're just doing it for 7,000 other men kind of thing. So, but it's all status based, and it's kind of mental.
I say it's a crazy world we're living in now.
Yeah, yeah.
You just don't know what to think. And, and not to harp on all this, but, social media doesn't really reflect the real world. So you do find more people that think along the line you do. I was fortunate enough after 10 years to find someone who we just about agree on everything. We still have things we don't agree on, but we
Yeah.
learn how to compromise. And one reason why I think that I was able to find someone is because I got in touch with myself again after the divorce, because you kind of lose yourself when you're with someone and you forget some of the things you really like and who you are for, really who you are. And I feel it's important for a man to take at least, a year or two off from relationships until you figure out who you are. So, I mean, did you find yourself in that situation, or you just were always who you are now?
Well, I'm just amazed by what you said. I love that you're just tearing pages out of my books in my head because that's what I always say to people. First of all, you knew who you were with someone, but you need to know who you are moving forward because you're a
Mhm.
different person. And it's not necessarily that they changed you into something you weren't. It's just that as a couple, you're a different person. And when you move out of a relationship, hopefully you pull forward the good and the bad. And I think baggage gets a bad rap because it's a good thing. Um, because it's something that you carry forward because you learned, and it's just it through experience. It doesn't mean that you throw that in everyone's face and say you're all X and you're all Y, but you do say, well, I learned this. This is a possibility. I always say that people need to have that 1 year alone. At least that's what I, because otherwise you're going to just try to reinvent that same relationship. You're going to have that rebound relationship where you sort of try to reinvent those feelings, because even people in abusive relationships look for that same abuse again
Mhm.
subconsciously because it feels comfortable, as scary as that is. And so what you
Yeah.
need to do is have that year alone, find yourself, allow yourself, give yourself a license to do the things, which for me was giving myself a license to write, because writing feels like you're just effing off. You're just, you're just screwing around. Regardless of what kind of writing it is, it just feels that way to me. Like, oh my God, stop playing around, Mark, and work. And it's like, well, this is actually work. But you need to give yourself a license to do those things and to respect yourself, and then move forward. And then this new person meets the person that you want to be with. So
Yeah.
for me, again, it was that the parenting thing was a very interesting experience for me. So, going through that and changing as a person, because you have to change as a single parent, because being the mom and the dad is impossible, but you do the best you can. You do the best you can to fulfill the role of the mom, which a male can only do so well, when you
Yeah.
should be focusing, because there, whether you want to flip the genders or whatever, it doesn't matter. But one of the roles is typically the authoritarian kind of bottom line. Wait till dad gets home. And then there's the softer thing. And when you have to play both, it's kind of weird. And I remember joking with my son and giving him a really hard time, like I was his big brother. And one time we were walking, and then all of a sudden, a half second later, I'm like, you should really zip up, son. It's kind of cold out. Like I like turned into the mom for like 20 seconds, but you have to do that. So I remember learning through that. So yeah, for me, it was definitely picking up these new skills and these new explorations and things like that.
One thing about parents, the benefits of having mom and dad is mom kind of nurtures that the emotional part of the child, while the dad more nurtures the more thinking and reasoning, and that's on along that line. And when you have to take on both roles, that's not easy. And did you find that your kids were being like resentful? And I mean, mine were seemed like they were pissed off all the time.
Yeah. I hate to say that, but yeah, I mean, it, I guess it's understandable that kids that are stuck with one parent are never really going to be satisfied.
Right.
And and when they go through what they had to go through in this household, with the traumatic stuff that they had to experience. I mean, at one point, my ex-wife called the police on my kids, and they were like 9 and 12, because
What?
she thought it was a good idea to maybe scare them into like being more obedient, kind of thing. Um, and I remember the police officer sat down with me afterwards, and I was literally filling out the divorce paperwork at the time. And he sat down and he said, "So, your wife has issues," which I don't think was the outcome she wanted. But yeah, the kids, I did the best I could to kind of undo that, but it wasn't really 100% my burden. And I remember taking them to a psychologist because I didn't want to be Obi-Wan, raising Darth Vader kind of thing. Oops.
Yeah.
So, with all the best intentions. And I remember the psychologist saying, "You're doing an exceptional job. Your kids are exceptionally well adjusted." And then she said, "So what are you doing for you?" And I just kind of stared at her like, huh? And that was when I realized that you need balance. And I realized you have to do stuff for you. And because it's the whole putting your mask on thing. Because if there's nothing left of you, there's going to be nothing left for your kids. And I was getting to that point where I was pushing myself so hard to make sure that I was both parents and I was taking care of them financially and I was doing all the stuff and I was, and your kids will definitely remind you that you're lacking. They will never hold back on that. They will definitely say, "Well,
I know that's
Mary's
right.
parents, da 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 da. Mary can afford this. Mary's parents do this and this. Well, Mary has two parents and blah blah." And it's like, well, and then you have that dating on your shoulders too. Like if relationships don't work out, not only do you feel bad, but now you feel like you missed an opportunity to kind of have kind of a mom figure in their life again. And I remember it happened once where I had a good relationship and we split very, very amicably and mutually. I was sitting in the car picking my son up from scouts, and my daughter was just sitting next to me, and she just started crying kind of silently. And I looked at her and I said, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I just want a mom." And then I felt the weight of the failure of that relationship, even though, again, it was a very mutual thing. Um, but yeah, that's that. I know that was a bit of a tangent, but yeah, if my kids at least, there was never any doubt that I could do more. But the thing I
Yeah.
did find out though, and advice I would give people is that this is a weird paradoxical twist. You will take responsibility for things that are not your responsibility, because if it's your responsibility, then you can fix it.
Yeah.
So you'll
True.
you'll 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 take that and you'll adapt to it. You'll go like, "Oh, that thing that's happening. Oh, that's mine. That's my fault. Okay, well then I can fix it." You can't fix it, pal. There's very little you have control over, and that's one of the things. And I found myself doing that constantly as somebody who likes to troubleshoot things and fix and create and build and augment and research. I was always going, "Well, is that something I could do better?" Which is, you're just going to kill yourself doing that. You can't constantly be doing that. But when you have two little voices telling you, "Yes, you probably can," it's hard not to.
I had to do a lot of changing in my life to really do right by my kids, because I got into a couple of bad relationships and ended up drinking again, and I was going backwards. Had to start all over again and say, okay, I need to get on track. And I have a better relationship now with my kids that they're grown up and out of the house. But you do feel that weight. You have to do everything.
Yeah.
But moving on to your writing, okay, I want to know about these books.
Okay. So yeah, so I wrote four, well, actually, right. Oh, how does this work? We're right here. There's a way. So I wrote four nonfiction. So I jumped into this whole status game thing, and I wrote the book called The Status Game. And then I realized I had created a foundation. I'm like, oh my God, this is really cool. This makes sense. And I kept trying to prove myself wrong, which is the actual scientific method. You create something and you go, so what's wrong with this? And then you go to your peers. And when no one says there's anything wrong with it, you go, okay. And so then I wrote the status game 2, and then I created a card game. And then I wrote a book on spirituality, religion, or lack thereof. And I thought I'd lose all my friends. They didn't care. And then I finally wrote the book on the whole coaching system and the podcast, which is Alchemy for Life. So that's what that was. I wrote that book, and it was interesting because it has just like formulas. But you know what? Here, I'll just show you real quick. So I wrote this, and basically it's a book about, and that's my whole thing is this. I love the little flask thing, and as you can see by over here too. So I wrote that with like these formulas for success, because I treated it like alchemy, because I figured that life is made of 3 things: time, energy, and resources. And we get this little full flask in the morning, and then we have to spill all this thing out for our kids and this and hobbies and cooking and work. And then it's like 6 o'clock and you're like, wait, and you're out, and you somehow have to make that work. So then after doing all this writing, and I think I wrote those books I wrote 4 books in 13 months. And it was just this insane amount of writing I was doing between clients and doing everything else. It was just like, if I had the time, I had to go do it. I kept being told over and over again to market the books and stop writing, and which is weird to tell someone who writes, because usually there's the other way around with the writer's block, and we're going to need this from you. So I took a walk. There's a cemetery by my house, which is really cool. It's like a park with dead people. And so I used to walk there all the time with the kids. And so for me, I walked there and I said, no thinking about writing, nothing. And I had this very unusually empty head, which for me is never. And I was walking, I was looking at statues and things like that. And then I heard voices. Now this is where you hang up on me, right? No, the voices weren't like dead people voices. They were actually a conversation in my head. And it was a beautiful, clear conversation between 2 people. And I was like, okay, I'm listening. And so and you can do this. You can do this with like things in your head. People do this all the time, where like if you have an interaction at work, you start to have a conversation in your head with Betty because she's such a jerk, and you go back and forth in your head, even though you don't want to, right?
Right.
So yeah, and so this was more of a positive version of that, where I was listening to these people. I'm like, okay, and I kept walking and listening, and then I was like really sad. I'm like, man, would that make a cool movie? What a great concept. And I was like, I'm never going to see that movie. That sucks. And then I thought, well, I guess if I made the movie, it would be that way. And then I started to think about a poem, and I was like, okay, I'm done. And I ran home and I wrote this poem. It was sort of a medieval kind of quatrain sort of poem. And I looked up and I went, okay, I just wrote the outline of a book. This is a book. Okay, I guess I know what I'm doing left. So then I sat down and I wrote the book. It's an epic hero's journey, coming of age, set 1,000 years in the future, after something horribly catastrophic happens now. Now, this was before COVID and all the other stuff happened, right? So, but when stuff started happening that was kind of in line with the book, it was really weird. Because even in the book at one point, people tear down, at least in Poland, they tear down all the statues. And then all of a sudden people were pulling statues down, and I was seeing all these images and videos of people pulling statues for an entirely different reason, mind you. But I was like, wait, if I write this stuff happened? It was really weird. And so I wrote the book, and I was thrilled with it. And it has a satisfying end and everything, but I realized it's only half the poem. I thought, well, I guess I have to write the sequel to it. So then it becomes a duet. So a trilogy is 3, a duet's 2. I didn't know until I wrote a duet. And so then I was terrified because people were really liking the book. I actually recorded the audiobook for it because people said I had a decent voice and blah, blah. And you can also save like $8,000 in not hiring someone too, if you do it yourself. But people always advise against the author doing it because they really should hire someone professional. But after 2 years and 200 episodes of podcasts and things, I thought, well, maybe I could do this. And so I ended up winning Best New Author from audiobookreviewer.com.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Congrats.
So I was pretty happy with that. And so then I ended up writing the second, and I started writing it, and I was terrified because I'm like, this was sort of a lightning in the bottle thing. There's no way. I mean, Mark, you're pushing this. You're going back to that same well. But I got to the first chapter and I went, oh my God, I'm back. This is the way it felt. It felt like this. It's just, this is the way it works. And I have this story to tell, and it has to be told at the speed it needs to be told and however many pages it takes to tell it. And so I wrote the sequel to it, and that was it. And so I was thrilled. But after releasing that and having people read it and so forth, I realized that there are things I touch on and hint on because we're talking about people. So 1,000 years in the future is 30 generations. If you can go back like 5 generations or 6 and go, I don't recognize these people. I don't know. I can't relate to how these people lived. Or 7 generations. Imagine people 30 generations from us in the future, in which essentially the Earth has these catastrophes in which, let's say, 90% of the population is gone, and something new rises up. But there's an element, not a very good element, that has risen up, that has sort of retarded the growth of people and things like that in a way that's, you'd have to read the book. And so societies are more medieval than anything. Technology, isn't really there and stuff like that. How would they relate to us when most of the knowledge is gone? So I had to explain, how do I explain 1,000 years? So then I came up with a prequel as sort of a thank you to everyone who wrote it. And that prequel basically explains 1,000 years. And I thought, well, how do I explain 1,000 years in 300 pages? So without it just being a narration. Well, and then this happened, and then this happened. And so basically I sat down and I started thinking about people and relationships, because that's what it relates to. No matter what kind of book you're reading, if it's got people and the relationships and you can relate to them, then you're interested. And so it turned out to be a series of vignettes through the years of people and families and relationships and stuff, and what happened to them until we get to the point where the book starts, The Sword and the Sunflower. So that's the name of the book. So that's how that all came about. And to me, dialogue is the most important. I mean, obviously in a fiction, because you can have a story about 2 people sitting in a booth and you can be like fascinated, even though they're not moving, there's no gunshots, there's nothing. But because because you can relate to them, you can feel for them, you can feel their pain and maybe anxiety and things, you'll keep turning the pages because that's interesting. Just like dialogue can break a book too if there's not enough of it or whatever, and you're describing trees for 3 pages or whatever, and you're like, okay, I get it, we're walking through a forest, okay, great. You need to have that interaction that you can relate to. Just like black and white characters don't work. I mean, this person is evil, okay, this person is a good person, okay, I don't know anyone like that. Everyone has like, their hopes and dreams and aspirations, and everyone has like that thing they've done wrong, or maybe something that they could be better at, but hey, I'm just a human being, and then you can relate to them. Go, hey, I'm a human being too, I did a shitty thing once, hey, cool. So I think that's extremely important. So that's how I write characters, is I need them to be realistic. I need them to react properly. In fact, I have a story about how important that was, but I think I've rambled enough. Just, I don't know, stop there in case you have a question or something.
No, you're doing fine. And, I think it's going to pique some people's curiosity and want to go read it. I'm fascinated with those kind of stories that I guess almost, no, I don't want to say dystopian, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, this is post-dystopian. Yeah, I had to kind of figure that out. So this is after the dystopia happens, and a nice, solid, healed sort of thing rises up from it on the earth, essentially. But there was that dystopian time, and I had to write about that in the 3rd book. And that was hard because I'm a happy endings kind of guy, and the 1,000 years was not a happy ending. I mean, the happy ending happens in the duet. It does not happen during that. There's a lot of suffering, and I'm like, so it was odd. It was odd for me. I'll go back to the characters. I have a method of writing, and I've actually taught some classes to some kids and other people on it. That's been so fun, in that I have a 3-pronged kind of way of doing fiction. There's 3 elements that work together, and if you focus on them and the right one, you'll never have writer's block. And so one of them is the characters. And so like you'll write the outline, which I call the foundation, and that'll tell you what's supposed to happen. and then you'll use your reality engine to create what's going to happen. Like, for example, if you know if I tell you, well, what if you're driving to work in your truck and I do this, or I throw this out the window, or I bump into you really hard while you're driving, what's going to happen? You know the physics of what's going to happen. Your reality engine will say, well, I'd probably try to get control of the car, this and this, it would make this sound, blah, blah. You can describe it, right?
Right.
And then you take that and then you add that to the characters themselves. Each character has their own selfish motivation. And by selfish, I mean, well, they're only going to think about themselves. They're not going to think, you as the author are thinking about 20 people. They're not doing that. So I had a chapter in one of my books in which one of the main characters went through a very terrible experience. And he knew that the next step was that they were going to have someone he cared very much for going through the same experience. And he said, screw this, I'm not doing this. He wouldn't do it, even though the outline told me it's supposed to happen. And he kind of bailed on me in my mind. So then the whole next chapter I had prepared didn't happen because the character, I needed to stay true to the character, because one of the worst things in writing and movies, and they do this all the time, is they will take a character and they'll bend their motivation for a plot twist. Like they'll take a character that you know would never cheat on someone, but they cheat on someone. Oh, it was a moment of weakness. Oh, well, that's not. This person would never do that. Well, we needed to move the plot forward, so we needed him to do something. Too bad. You're so the characters will push back in such a way, and I think the reward for that has been one of the two comments I get in the book all the time in the reviews is the characters seem like real people, which is tremendous. And the other one is it felt like I was watching a movie because all the experience I have with sensory input, I want them to experience as well. It's not just visual.
Right.
Like when you're talking to somebody, you don't just, he said da 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 da, and then Mark said da 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 da, and then Kyle said da da da. No, I blink, I look over there, I think, I consider for a second, I take a deep breath, I take a sip from my coffee, and then you take advantage of that by saying, well, wait a second, I have a question, and that's how conversation's a very fluid, dynamic, interactive thing. So I want to make sure it's written that way. And one thing that happened with it is that I have, in my writing style that I developed, I separate dialogue a bit from description in that I want it to stand on its own. And I had someone in Wales who read the book and reviewed it and said this was an easy read. And when I told my editor about it, she's like, your book is not an easy read. Your book is something that requires attention to it because there's a lot of detail there that people can absorb. And when I read further, he was saying, because he literally said, I have ADHD and all the words weren't squished on the page. And I had to think about that. And I realized that in the olden days of novels, it costs a lot of money to print books. So they printed all the way to the margin, tiny little font. Everything was crammed together. Paragraphs were only indented, never separated. And so because of my style of separating that, he was like, oh, people are talking. I get it now. And it was so much easier for him. And it's just such a cool advantage. So that was really cool.
Yeah, there's something about those books that you really have to pay attention to what's going on and keeps your interest. That's the way it was for me reading Animal Farm. I had to read it like 3 times to really pick up on everything. But I love reading like that. 1984, Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah.
I mean, these are things you have to pay attention to, or you're gonna lose the whole meaning behind it.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I think it's important not to insult the reader. Like I just assumed all the readers were very bright people who enjoyed having all this to work with. There's a lot of people, a lot of writers, a lot of authors will tell you about leading the reader, but they lead too much. They lead way too much, and they kind of ruin even movies now. Even the trailers will basically ruin the movie. Well, you'll see a trailer and be like, okay, thank you for that. You gave me the plot twist. You gave me too much, and they do that all the time just to keep people's interest that are used to watching 20-second TikTok videos. They're like, well, we got to get these people, versus giving them a little bit of intrigue and going, well, and I was really careful with not revealing things. I wanted, people worked for it, but they were rewarded. There was always a payoff for the attention that they paid. And that's something that I would value greatly from someone who wrote. I think, well, he really thinks a lot of me. He knows that I could get this. And that's, as an author, something that is so rewarding, because if you can write, there was a blue beach ball, and then and if they say, well, I read that there was a blue beach ball, big deal. But if they read and they go, you know what, I realized that he would do anything for her. I never said that, but you got that through his actions, and that's the subtlety that's so cool for people to pick up on and just absorb.
Well, and like you said about the movies, I can't stand how a lot of movies insult your intelligence. Let's take Star Wars, for example. When we were growing up and Star Wars came out, you saw the story, Luke Skywalker, he had to go through all this stuff, and it took him 3 movies to become a real Jedi.
Right.
And then the new ones come out, and all of a sudden this person has all these powers and knows how to use them, hasn't gone through any training and all that stuff. I'm going, okay, you've just ruined the whole, you have to work for what you want here, and it's demeaning.
Yeah.
I mean, to me it is. I don't know how you feel about it, but a lot of these movies, and then there's not as much creativity, I believe, in movies anymore, because it seems like the same old formula over and over again, or they're remaking old movies. So come up with some new stuff.
Right. No, those I 100% agree. You're talking about, so first of all, if you're talking about the new Star Wars with Rey, she's essentially a Mary Sue, which they will argue that she isn't. But for those who don't know that, it's when essentially the author writes themselves into the story, and they write a character that everybody likes them. They're infinitely good at everything they try, and they have zero growth. Well, that's no fun. That's no fun. That's someone in your life that would annoy you. Like, you can't learn anything from them. People need to have an arc. And that's the cool thing about writing a hero's journey, which is what Star Wars was through 3 movies. It was Luke's hero's journey. Yep. And even Darth Vader had an arc. He was redeemed at the end. He finally chose that, and that's what killed him. Was throwing the guy down the chute there, which we learned with the new movies didn't kill him at all. Not at all. And you have to have that. Luke failed a lot. He had a lot of failures. He was not great at a lot of things. He was so naive. He didn't understand. Han Solo was the cool guy that had to explain a bunch of stuff to him. Princess Leia made a lot of fun. You're too short for a stormtrooper. All that stuff. She really, he had to humbly continue on. And then when he became a Jedi and wore all the black clothes and he was all cool and everything, you're like, yeah, because you were with him. And that was very important to me too in the book, is to write a hero's journey for not just one character, but at least 3 characters go through that hero's journey in their own special way. And you see that, you see growth. You can compare something that happens in the beginning of the book to something that happens near the middle and the end, and go, oh, that person's different about that. They've grown a bit. They've learned. And you have to have the flaws too. I mean, we all have flaws, and I think that's what made the Marvel movies initially so interesting and relatable, just like the Marvel comics was. Like, Iron Man had an alcoholism problem, and you could relate to that. You
right.
had Hulk, who had these other beginnings that were this. Captain America was somebody who had the spirit of a very strong person, but he was just this little guy and sacrificed happiness and all that stuff to become that, and so forth. So you have to have the flaws that you can relate to, and then you can really get into it, instead of this perfection character that's always perfect. It's boring.
It is. When you just acquire some powers and all of a sudden you're awesome. There's no fun in that.
That's what villains do.
Yeah. I mean, you want that journey.
Yeah. And that's kind of the villain. It's funny too, because people are saying that that's sort of the villain origin. Villain origins, typically they get power because they want it, and then they just use it. And they're like applying that to heroes now, and like, oh, you want power? I wanted power, now I have it, now I'm a hero. No, most people who are heroes are reluctant heroes because they don't see themselves as the hero, And that's the thing that makes it interesting, is you see this person who's been thrust into the role of a hero, but they don't feel it, and they have their own flaws, and they have all self-doubts. And if this person who's so powerful has these self-doubts, and I have self-doubts, I don't feel so bad, because look at this person, they have self-doubts, and they're that much better than I am. And you kind of need to look up to that sort of thing.
And I think a misconception that some people get is that people like you and I have a problem with a woman being a hero. That's not it. I want them to go through the same stuff that these guys went through, to obtain your heroism. This the way things go now, it's a reflection of how society is, because
Yeah.
you got a computer in your hand, you see something that you want, you hit a couple of buttons, and it could be an hour, it could be a day, and you have it right there at your fingertips. When we were kids, remember going through the Sears catalog and finding stuff and sending off
Oh yeah.
for it, and it took you 6 to 8 weeks before you got it, and that
Exactly.
anticipation coming.
Right.
I don't think the kids feel that nowadays.
No, instant
Everything's
gratification.
instant. Yeah, exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Instant gratification.
Well, go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
You made two really good points, and one of them was about the whole. It's so easy to say, "Oh, you don't want that person to win because they're female." I mean, yeah, let's ignore the fact that Alita Battle Angel was this pretty great movie. You can go through on and all in Marvel and all these strong, powerful women that you can get behind, of course,
Mm-hmm.
because they still need to have flaws and they still need to have trials and tribulations. In my book, one of the main characters is a very young lady who goes through a tremendous arc, a very heroic, tremendous arc is her hero's journey through the book. And I'd say I would stack her up against any powerful woman, powerful, strong, independent woman anywhere. I would say she is fantastic in that way, and I applaud that. But for the sake of doing that, no. If you say, well, this person has to be this, or this, no. They are what they are. They are what the
Mm-hmm.
author perceives them to be, and you can relate to them regardless of their race or their gender or anything. You will relate to them because of their spirit and not
Yeah.
because of what you see, because that's the whole point of it, is that you see past all that stuff.
I mean, I'm. I think you're like me. I love Wonder Woman, and she had to go through a lot of training before she became who she became.
Yeah.
And then you look at the origin of, say, Storm for Marvel.
Yeah, yeah.
She lived on the streets. She didn't have anything. She had to steal to survive, and
Yeah.
you got a character like Rogue, who all of a sudden came into this power and then realized she couldn't touch anyone again and had to learn how to control, and there's just so many amazing characters, male or female.
Well, look at the movie Alien. I mean, Ripley,
Yes,
tremendous. No one blinked when she was the main character. No one said, "Oh, she's a woman." Nope.
I
Just
love
like
that
just like
movie.
Linda Hamilton in the original Terminator.
Mm-hmm.
Look at the tremendous character arc she went through. She was just somebody who was kind of ditzy a little bit and this, and she was forced into that role, and she's working out physically, and you see her doing pull-ups and stuff, and she is a very believable, strong heroine. She's the hero, and she would do anything for her son and has to protect him and all that stuff. And she is somebody who is levels beyond the people that she meets. The people in the psych ward and all that stuff. She's just and we had that in the 80s. I mean, we had all that in the 80s, and now we're like going backwards in that. Like,
I don't understand society now. Everything that we've worked so hard for decades is now going backwards, and they want to give up so much. Remember how you had, okay, let's take Lenny Bruce. Okay. Great comedian.
yeah,
The guy got arrested because he cussed on stage, and he talked about things that seemed vulgar, but everybody fought against censorship, and which led to your George Carlins and Richard Pryor and so on and so forth. And then it got to be more accepted, and now everybody's getting on comedians' cases and wanting censorship.
yeah,
I just don't understand.
yeah, exactly. It's so strange that we've gone in two directions at once. There's things that people can talk about that are kind of oddly disturbing that they probably shouldn't. But by the same token, everyone's offended if they talk about something that was easy to talk about in the 80s, like openly. And
Mm-hmm.
talking about those things made people, I don't know, made people relate, made people be able to relate to people of different lifestyles and all that stuff, because you could talk about, and you could just be yourself and so forth. And like, just like what Blazing Saddles, they couldn't
Oh, they
they couldn't
couldn't do that movie now.
yeah, I mean, I know, I think someone there was somebody who was an actor who was on Joe Rogan, and they were talking about that, how like their movie from the 80s couldn't be put out today. And just like John Cleese came under fire on Twitter for something he said. And it was like, if you can't, this is the death of comedy if we can't. And just like, South Park said a long time ago, it's either all funny or none of it's funny.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
no, this, we can't talk about this sort of thing.
And see, that's what I like about South Park is it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you're on. They make fun of everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the way it should be. We should be able to laugh at ourselves. But it's funny you mentioned John Cleese. He was just here at South by Southwest in Austin.
Oh, wow.
And he got up and said a few things that some people ran out on stage and actually took the microphone away from him.
Well, I'm gonna have to look that up. Wow.
It's quite hilarious, the story. I won't get into it because I'll probably get kicked off of YouTube for it, but
Right.
it's quite funny.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you said you made a card game too?
I did.
I
did.
got to hear this.
Yeah. So after seeing the status game and after understanding that and after going on like a gazillion dates, because one year I just basically thought it's a numbers game. I just have to keep at it. And I was killing myself trying to meet the right person and things that I would, I'd say yes to dates that probably I shouldn't have said yes to. But I thought, well, maybe she's having a bad day. Maybe she's having maybe it's a bad photography day, whatever. I'm not perfect, blah, blah, blah. And, a lot of them were duds. Some of them were just horrible. But I realized a number of things, so I created this card game. It's the status game card game, and it's date down, marry up, and it's really simple. But I can grab them and I can show them.
Sure, let's see. I want to see them.
Let's see. Let me grab a few. So here's the card game.
Oh,
and,
wow.
It's so basically you start out. You have positive and negative cards, things that add to your status and take away from your status, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, sorry for the delay. This
no. That
doesn't make for.
I enjoy it. No problem.
I'm trying to find the cards. Okay, so basically, people are given the cards, and the point of the card game is to find someone you're playing with to date, because you want to date them before you can marry them. So to win the game, you have to marry someone. If you ask them to marry you and they have higher status than you, then you won. If you ask them to marry you and they say yes, but you have the higher status, then they just won. It's that simple, right? And so there are there's positive cards that you have. So like you're hilarious, but of course you get a +3, but not if you're female, because we don't care if women are funny. We've evolved that way. We are trying to be funny because we're the peacocks. We want to throw our feathers up.
The only one that matters is Betty White. So
right. So then you have a good job, or if you have an injury that takes away because you're trying to date, but now you're getting fat because you have your injury. You might have a bad job. And the artist who originally drew something that looked way too much like an M, so I had to replace that. And then there's works out and so forth. And so just like tall, you get a huge +4 for tall because women very much like height. There's also a retail therapy card, but someone might be on a special diet. And as you know, young kids, it's kind of harder to date if you have young kids and things like that. Wealthy is a huge plus. So you have all these cards, and that's what builds your status in your hand. And there's some really attractive. And basically, you have cards that you lay down that people can see, because like if you're attractive or tall, people can see that. But there's other cards that you hold in your hand that people can't necessarily see. Just like there's an addiction card. And so I have two special cards that look identical, and I have a story on this. So one of them is called harmless chatting, and then the other it looks just like the flirt card. Okay, so while you're playing, you can pass either one of these cards to someone else because you don't want too many cards in your hand. The more cards you have in the hand, the less chance you have to date someone because you're too busy. Just like in real life, if you go, I have spin class, I have this and this and this, and you're like, oh, when can I see you? How does August sound? So you're not going to have a relationship, right? So it was really funny. There were I was playing this at a meetup with some people, and there was this big guy, and then there was this little guy, and they were actually dating in the game because it doesn't matter. And the little guy took one of these cards and he passed it over to somebody else, this other guy, because he's trying to get rid of it. And the other guy looked at him, and he looked really mad. And we all looked at him because he was this big guy, and we're like, "Were you mad?" He's like, "Yeah, I was mad. I was jealous." Because like it literally, even though he was another male and he wasn't interested in males, he was jealous of the guy because it looked like he was flirting. It was so
Oh
funny.
no.
And
Oh no.
it invoked all of it. So anyway, when people use the card game, it generates a lot more conversation than like playtime, because they just like, they get the card and they're like, yeah, just like the baggage card. Like when you're dating in the game and you break up with someone, you can either toss the baggage card or you can give it to them. And if you give it to them, you can take something negative about yourself and give it to them. So you can say, well, I'm giving you my workaholic, because you're in a relationship, and because your mate has an addiction, you could pick up the addiction moving forward, or you could pick up the fact that she was a workaholic, or she was somebody who worked out constantly and so forth. So yeah,
In,
so it's kind of a fun thing to design, kind of an insane thing to design.
I could see that being beneficial in therapy.
Yes.
And, even if you weren't going to openly admit it, I could see you playing that game and realize how either virtuous or shallow that you are.
Well, it's true, because it's very true, because there's it touches on a lot of aspects of relationships, and even even things like long distance relationship, and how that takes away from you and so forth. I actually have a talk designed that use these cards. It's something that I've been working on, but I'm not sure if I found the venue. But I would kind of like to. Okay, so contrary to me creating the dating site, I don't want to be the dating guy. I don't want that I don't want that label.
Right.
I just want to find someone really awesome, and that's it. But people keep telling me to create a seminar on this, and so I could create a seminar on the status game and talk about that, and then use the cards for people to really like understand. I can literally pass them out and have people say, "Is this you? Is this you?" And like you could literally have someone like hold up the single parent card or hold up the workaholic card and stuff, and we could talk about it. So you're right. It really does feel like a therapy deck more than it feels like a gaming deck.
Man.
So,
Well, if someone wants to get any of these things, how do they do so?
so the easiest way is, markbradford.org. So org, markbradford.org. That has all my stuff on it. It's basically the hub that connects you to all of my books. It also connects you to my Alchemy for Life site. So it's alchemy4.life. But it connects you to there in case you want to see that and coaching and all the other nonsense. And it even connects up to like the cards and where you can get those, and the Sword and the Sunflower and Amira and Upside Down. So and those are the fiction that I've recently written. So you can get all that there. It's probably the easiest way to do that. And I'm on Instagram too, and I'm addicted to posting reels now, and I'm wasting way too much time posting reels. So that's at author Mark Bradford, and I'm happy to send this all to you in an email in case you want to put it
Yeah,
in
I
your.
want to share all this, and I'll put all of it in the description, and that way people can just click on it and go to it. Before we go, do you have some more future fiction books that you're going to write?
So I have two that are in sort of the table in my mind. I have two. They're both standalones, and I think the trilogy that I just wrote sort of broke me in a lot of ways that I'm trying to recover from, because it's when you have a poem that kind of comes out of the sky to tell you what to write, it's hard to know how to write that next book now. And I do have the outlines all done with them. I also have two nonfiction books. I've actually written a nonfiction book, and it's just sitting there. I haven't done anything with it. And it's about how the three voices that we have and how we communicate with each other and internally. But I don't feel like it's a great description of how our minds work, but so what? Like I want to give people more than that. I want to tell them what to do with it. So that one's sitting there. I just fell in love with the characters when I wrote this book, that I don't want to dilute them. The worst thing that can happen, as you saw with Star Wars, is you take this fantastic concept and you just keep going back to it and pulling at it and going, oh look, it's Star Warsy-ish kind of, and it's like, no, you're kind of ruining it, And I don't want to do that with my books. even though people have asked and they've said, I'd love to see these characters continue. So that's the crossroads I'm at right now when it comes to writing on what's next.
I'm with you, man. I got projects on the back burner that I want to do, but mine's mostly paintings and all. But
Oh, cool.
I've got some writing that I would love to do, but I'm not a writer. So I don't know. Maybe one day.
Yeah. Well, I actually opened a school called Alchemy for Me, in which I have online classes on writing fiction and nonfiction. And there's a couple free classes people can take too, in case you just want to see what it's like. But I do think that if I sit down with someone who wants to write, I think it's pretty easy to unlock their ability to write, because a lot of the blocks that they have is sort of what society has put upon them. And like I said, one of the biggest things is giving yourself a license to write. Because you'll be like, well, that's cool, but I don't want to waste time for an hour screwing around with this. This is, well, why not? Why aren't you allowed to have fun? Why, you're allowed to go for a beer with someone, you're allowed to watch a football game. Why can't you sit down and write? Just, go easy on yourself. So I think that's probably the biggest block people have, is they don't give the license. And then they have something which I call stolen validation. So instead of talking about it, because if you tell people, oh, I'm writing this book on this, or I'm doing this, or I'm going to lose weight, everyone goes, yay, good for you. And you're like, oh, that felt good. Now I don't have to do it. Well, so you steal that from your future self. So I always say, kind of keep that inside, so that you can look in the mirror and say, we're writing a book right now, we're losing weight, and then you can feel a lot better about that when you show people and say, ta-da. And I can't tell you the feeling it was to reveal that I had that book come out. It was just such an amazing thing to just sort of spring that on everyone and say, yep, I wrote this. And getting your hands on the hard copy is like the most wildest thing I've read. Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm very visual. When I got the hard copies for them, oh my God, I just was like, I was in heaven. It was the coolest thing. And here's the sequel that I told you about. And then I actually created both of the books in one. This maxed out the amount of pages allowable on Amazon.
Wow.
So yeah, it actually has the full poem on the back too, that the whole book was written from. It's kind of like a special edition thank you for people. So, but just to be able to do that is so cool when you keep it. I don't want to say keep it inside you, because I don't want to tell you something that sounds psychologically negative, but I mean, just rewarding yourself versus going to others for the rewards. I mean, it's great to have people behind you, so don't get me wrong, but hopefully this makes sense and I'm not confusing.
Oh, no. I get you.
Yeah.
So can people get to that from your website too?
Oh, these books, sure. Yeah, there's links on Amazon for all the books.
I meant for the writing.
Oh, the writing. Yeah. The Alchemy for Me is also on there too, for people to take a look at the classes and stuff. I literally have a coaching client right now where I'm coaching her on writing a book that she's been wanting to write. And she's written most of it, but she's running into some stumbling blocks, which are so easy to get around because we kind of impose these, like I said, for writer's block and things like that. It's really easy to get around writer's block with fiction, and it's easy to get around it with nonfiction, because nonfiction, you're just putting a hierarchy together of where your thoughts are. Does this go underneath this thought, or is this a main thought? It's once you figure that out, it's like writing an article or even an email. You're just trying to convey an idea, but in a very long 400-page form. That's all.
Well, Mark, I appreciate you coming on and giving me your time today. And I don't know, maybe we can talk on when your new books come out.
Oh, absolutely.
I'd love to do that.
And this was I really enjoyed speaking with you. This was really nice to be able to kind of relate back and forth instead of a 20 questions sort of thing. It's kind of nice to hear you tell me your story as well. I really appreciate that.
But when we get done, I have some things that's going to kind of scare you, how we're kind of the same. So, okay. But anyway, thank you. And for those that are new to the channel, thank you for stopping by, and I hope you come back. Please subscribe. And for those of you who are regular to the channel, thank you for your support. It's because of you we do what we do. And so until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network